Can this spark the Timberwolves defense? There's a reaction. Let's get it.
A team with a winning record, which isn't overly impressive, except that it's the first time they've actually accomplished that all season. Now, there's been a lot of reasons why they didn't have a win against a winning team in 7 attempts before this Celtics win, but the main one has been their defense. Minnesota has allowed 125.7 points per 100 possessions in those 7 losses against 500 or better teams this season, which would be worse than the 30th ranked Brooklyn Nets on the season as a whole. And it seemed like this game was going down the same dark path. In the first half, they gave up 143.8 points per 100, so it's no surprise that when they gave up just 95.8 points per 100 in the second half, they were able to scrape past the Celtics and actually claim a win against a decent team. Now, it's not shocking that Minnesota had inconsistencies in-game against Boston. It's been that way all season long, but this game was a pretty good example of what they do when things are going wrong for their defense, but also what they do when things are working defensively for them.
And they had a good game with this one against Boston. You know, they clutched it out. It was a few points they clutched out too. And it was just good looks, good offense, and they had some good defensives, make them turnovers, and was able to get rebounds too.
To me, this almost begins and ends with the way they defend ball screens. If we're talking their base coverage, which is Gobert in a drop playing 2-on-2 with the on-ball defender and the rest of their team on their man, they're getting caught here where the on-ball gets picked off and then the defense crumbles. This time DiVincenzo doesn't veer back to the roller and they end up here with 2 on the ball and nobody to cover the roll man who gets an easy dunk. Most of the time though, Minnesota's issues are with switching. Now, there's obviously a lot of different things that fall under that label, but Minnesota have had their struggles with all of them this season. Again, when it's standard pick and roll with a big and a small, the confusion on whether Gobert is stepping up to take this switch while Ant holds up the roll man is a pretty consistent issue for the Wolves against these teams with dangerous 3-level scorers.
And it's just bad communication, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like one of them, as far as leadership, say, hey, if this guy keeps screaming me and I hold him, just go ahead and come up and contest the shot if the guy pulls through.
On the ball. In general, I'd say there's an obvious confusion with the defensive scheme when Minnesota isn't defending well. It does seem like Clark thinks Gobert is going to step up here while he switches onto the big, but in the first half of this game and a ton of games this season, they've allowed these walk-up mid-range jumpers when that confusion reigns. It's hard to know exactly what they're trying to run as a base switching scheme, but I have to imagine that Clark peeling off and Gobert not pressing up on Jaylen Brown isn't what they set out to achieve on possessions like this. So maybe it's a communication issue or a scheme issue or just a
it's definitely a communication issue.
Team ethos to allow those mid-range jumpers, but it's problematic against players who like that shot, and good teams usually have at least 1 or 2 of those players. Now really, any action with Gobert is actually the least of Minnesota's defensive worries. The real issue is when they're switching outside of Gobert. They get those possessions wrong way too often. Most of the time, it's 2 guys going with the ball, leaving a shooter open with 1 guy trying to shade between them both now. I don't think these are intentional doubles or traps because there's no rotations happening behind it and everyone kinda just seems confused when it happens. Randall's a major culprit of this, DiVincenzo is a major culprit of this, and Dillingham, Edwards, and Conley all get caught up in these actions a lot as well. It's become a core theme of Minnesota's defense this season, especially against more capable teams, which is why it's noticeable when they break out of that funk, start to nail these switches, and begin to look like a legit defense again for longer stretches. This was the first possession that felt like they were on a string with their switches. McDaniels gets folded by this screen, and not only does Gobert start to actually move up to switch, but McDaniels recognizes the peril and curls off to cover the open roll man and make a play at the rim. I mean,
Oh, good
McDaniels is the
stuff.
linchpin of this defense, so it's no surprise that he also disperses back out and forces a tough shot.
Yep.
But I think that awoke something in this defense that we really haven't seen that much this season. They still do have enough.
It's really just making the extra effort, right? That's all it is. I feel like a lot of players, not just Timberwolves, but just players in general, they're very active when it comes to offense, but when it comes to defense, they just like they don't take the extra step. They don't take the extra, what I'm saying, the extraness that you need to create a play.
Athletes and enough defenders to be a good defense, but unless they're nailing these switching concepts, it's not going to happen. So it was encouraging to see them lock that down in the second half of this game. I think a lot of the time, good switching is almost unnoticeable. But executing here with Nas switching up and Conley fading off without overcommitting prevents an easy bucket. And when DiVincenzo scrambles up into this switch, he then allows Reed to get back onto the screener and not the player looking to take him off the dribble. And in general, it just allows Minnesota to defend in isolation more, rather than having to chase their tails like they did in the first half. I thought this was another really good example as well. Celtics are running this horn slip action, and it's a quick switch on the ball screen to contain and shut off a drive, but when the slip happens down the middle, Randall is alert to it and switches with DiVincenzo. Everyone needs to be on a string here, so even if Shannon does get hung up a little on this switch, Reed is there to stunt at the shooter and force him into a bad decision. Like I said, I feel like sometimes those things are really easy to miss, but they're also really easy to spot when things aren't executed like we saw in the first half of this game. And I think
They
on the
definitely seem
other
like they want to
side of the
pivot.
switching coin is choosing the right time not to switch. Like Conley and DiVincenzo not switching here in perfect sync is just as important as nailing a switch there, and it's every bit as important as executing this switch on the next screen. This feels like a little in the weeds kind of thing, but we've seen over and over again how messing up these concepts creates open shots against Minnesota's defense.
Yeah.
Again, they switch the big up.
And Boston keeps trying to run these screens up to the top keys over here, kind of midway through the court. It's like if you're forcing turnovers and it ain't working, you need to draw different offensive plays, because now they basically figure out this is like 3 plays back to back.
Nas Reed, who has improved a ton on these switches as the season has progressed, but they don't give up the second switch onto the smaller Conley, and that means Nas Reed can use his side to bother Pritchard on the drive instead. And sometimes no switching at all is just as effective. Here, DiVincenzo and Conley both hold their matchups on the handoff. Off the ball, Shannon fights over a screen instead of switching with Reed, so that Reed can drop back into the paint as a rim protector who can slide over to help, but not actually switch off his man, keeping the defensive shell intact and forcing Boston into a reset and a tough look. That's how important switching is for all teams, but especially Minnesota right now, with how inconsistent they've been defensively, especially against better competition. They're not always going to nail it in the way that they did in the second half of this game, but a commitment to doing it like that more often will go a long way to internally improving this team. If you want to see more...
Yeah, they should definitely improve the communication. And it looks like that they're on the same page. It just, with the first half, it's kind of tricky. They didn't look like they were on the same page. Communication might falter there in that situation. Maybe they wasn't aware of a lot of the switch offs, mismatches with the screens and stuff like that. But they definitely caught wind of it and was able to capitalize and pulled out a win. And that's just what it is, man. Good defense also helps win games too, not just offense. If you don't have good enough defense to at least secure and keep the other players from scoring so much, then you're not falling shots, and you have a bad off day of like offense, then yeah, you're in some trouble. So it's definitely good. I tapped in and watched some of the big highlights of this. as far as Boston Celtics and Timberwolves, and they were looking good. You know, they were looking good. It was the defense though, definitely what a lot of people was complaining about is something they had to work on. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed it, man, about the reaction just and the breakdown itself, I'll have this video in the channel in the description, and also hit that like button, subscribe button on this channel. See you on the next one. Peace.